You can submit questions through the question and answer tab at the bottom right of your Zoom panel. And we will try to get to all of your questions, but if we're unable to, you can definitely leave your email and we'll try to get back to your questions after the fact. Just so you know, we're really excited to be here and to engage in this discourse with you, but we do have a zero tolerance policy for any form of disrespect. So keep it respectful or you will be removed from the panel. Thank you so much for being here once again. I want to take a moment to acknowledge that we are gathering virtually from across Canada, also known as Canada, on the unceded territory of different Indigenous communities. Teesri Duniya Theatre operates and produces our plays on the unceded territories of the Kani and Kahaka people, who are the custodians of the lands, waters, and resources. Racial violence and systemic racism is a symptom of the larger capitalist colonial system that Canada is based off and continues to perpetuate. And so we cannot speak of racism amongst institutions and individuals without also addressing the ongoing oppressive relationship that the colonial institution known as Canada has with Indigenous communities. We intend this land acknowledgement to openly discuss our responsibility to redress the generations of colonial violence that is the legacy of settlers on this land. And we encourage folks to further educate themselves on the historical and current colonial forces that have and are continuing to shape present-day life across Turtle Island. And we further encourage people to take action to support Indigenous anti-colonial struggles to return the unceded lands, stop the development of pipelines, and end the violence perpetrated against Indigenous peoples and their traditional lands. So thank you for joining me in this acknowledgement. I would like to first introduce our first panelist, Mr. Ehab Lotayef. Ehab is a Canadian IT manager, poet, writer, and community activist of Egyptian origin. He holds a degree in electrical engineering from Ain Shams University in Cairo, Egypt. Ehab moved to Canada in 1989, is a father of two, also engineering graduates, and has 3 grandchildren. Ehab is deeply involved in social and community work, including campaigns against the sanctions and war on Iraq, opposing the blockades of Gaza, and advocating for Native rights. Over the years, he has served on boards of Egyptian-Canadian Coalition for Democracy, Muslim Council of Montreal, Muslim Schools of Montreal, the Canadian Arab Federation, Fair Vote Canada, and is currently serving on the Board of Governors of McGill University and Montreal City Mission. As a poet and writer, Ehab published a bilingual poetry collection, To Love a Palestinian Woman, and the CBC produced his play Crossing Gibraltar in 2006. His writings also appeared in many anthologies and zines, and he wrote numerous op-eds on various subjects in many Canadian papers over the years. Ehab also served on the boards of Teesri Duniya Theatre and CKUT Radio, and is currently serving on the board of the Quebec Writers Federation. Thank you so much for being with us here today, Ehab. I would like to invite Mr. Lotayef now just to introduce Muslim Awareness Week.
Thank you, Summer, and thank you, Teesri Duniya Theatre, for partnering with Muslim Awareness Week in this event. I just thought that it's important that our attendees know about Muslim Awareness Week. Muslim Awareness Week was really born from the tragic events of January 29, 2017 in Quebec City. It is an attempt to deal with the root causes of the hate and xenophobia that caused the loss of life in that tragic event. Muslim Awareness Week goes beyond just commemorating what happened and commemorating the victims of the 2017 attack by organizing many events, activities with partners like Teesri Duniya Theatre in the last week of January of every year, with the aim of having people know Muslims as they are, as individuals beyond stereotypes, as people who live and contribute to society, who have their concerns and aspirations like everybody else. And with that, we hope that people can get close together, can have more understanding of each other, and thus really contribute to social harmony and peace, and move us away from the possibility of seeing a repeat of what happened in 2017. This is something that no group and no organization can do alone. It needs society to do it together, and we are always open to partnering with anybody and any group that can help us reach the widest audience possible for exactly those goals. It is not a religious week per se. It is simply a week to give us more opportunity to know each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Ehab. And thank you once again to Muslim Awareness Week for holding this wonderful programming and for including us. It's really an important mission, and I'm really grateful to be here and be included in this discourse. I would like to introduce our next panelist, Ms. Nadia Naqvi. Ms. Nadia Naqvi was born and raised in Montreal and has been a high school teacher with the Lester B. Pearson School Board since 2006. Since 2017, she has created and implemented workshops on racism, Islamophobia, and bullying for adults as well as students, both in elementary and high school. She sits on the advisory committee of the National Council of Canadian Muslims. Lastly, she is the co-founder and president of the Quebec Muslims Teachers Association. Thank you, Nadia, so much for being with us here today. And I'm really excited to hear more about your experience with the school board in Montreal.
Thank you.
I would also, welcome, thank you for being here. And I will introduce our third panelist, Ms. Nour Farhat, who is a lawyer in civil litigation and constitutional law in Montreal, Canada. Holder of a master's degree in criminal law, she has a strong interest for matters related to human rights, criminal, and constitutional law. Farhat speaks regularly in the media in order to comment on current legal developments, particularly criminal law and Canadian constitutional law. She has been involved for several years in the promotion and defense of fundamental human rights. She is currently involved in the legal proceedings challenging the secularism law of Quebec, known as Bill 21, the law that bans public sector workers in positions of authority, including teachers, lawyers, police officers, and judges, from wearing religious symbols on the job. Welcome, Ms. Farhat, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Last but not least, I would like to introduce our wonderful moderator, Ms. Deborah Ford, and then I will pass it on to her. Deborah Ford is a director, dramaturg, playwright, and arts administrator. In 1999, after over 20 years in community development, Deborah's work led her to the practice of professional community-engaged arts through the study of theatre for development at Concordia, emerging first as a director with Brian James's Terminal and Rahul Verma's State of Denial. Deborah went on to spend 2 years supporting other emerging artists through Black Theatre Workshops Youth Works, and 3 years serving the English-speaking theatre community as executive director for the Quebec Drama Federation. She is currently an administrator and HR manager with ELAN and returned to directing with the inaugural production of Canada's first Muslim theatre company, Silk Road Institute. Deborah continues to freelance with Teesri Duniya Theatre and Silk Road Institute families, and is pleased to continue supporting emerging artists and to facilitate community connection to and through theatre. Thank you so much, Deborah, for being here today and for moderating this panel. And with that, I will pass it on to you. Hi, Deborah. Sorry, you're muted at the moment.
Oh, life in 2020-21. Hello, everybody. Let's try that again. Thanks again, Summer. Thanks to everyone who's joining us this afternoon. So I want to dig right down and get to the heart of this for me as someone who has been an advocate in the past and who continues to do advocacy work. I understand how this can change your life. And particularly when you are someone who falls into a category of other, we're often divided into the good ones and the bad ones. The good ones being those that keep their heads down, don't make any waves, don't ask any question. And the bad ones, the ones who assert themselves and insist on being treated like human beings. Surprise, surprise. So the question I have for you in this world, particularly as we hear about the violence, the anger, the racism being directed at your community, why would you want to stand up and say, hey, I want to speak on this subject? So let me get started with Nour. Tell me why for you is this so important?
So I think that at a time when the protection of rights is so necessary in 2020, 2021, The Quebec government has chosen populism over the protection of minority rights and over the protection of human rights. So sadly, there is nothing right now to hide the Quebec government's disregard of human rights. It's been like that since the government of François Legault has taken over. There is no more like subtle discrimination. It's all official, it's all in laws. And this is something that is so dangerous. And this is something that we have never seen since the adoption of the Charters of Rights and Freedom. So Bill 21 prohibits like entire categories of people, of employees to work for the government because of the wearing of a religious symbol. For some religious communities, wearing a religious symbol is not only a question of preference, it's a question of your core religious observance. So Bill 21 bans these people from all these spheres of work, and they ban these people from having a say in what's happening in society today. I cannot be a crown prosecutor. This is something that prohibits me to having an opinion on what's happening in law, in the decisions that the Quebec government is taking. So I think it's up to every citizen, honestly, to take a position against what's happening right now with the Quebec government, because a violation of one right is a violation of the right of everyone. Because when the Quebec government is violating one right, he's weakening the rights of every Canadian. He's weakening the application of the Charters of Rights and Freedom.
Absolutely. Nadia, how about for you, especially as someone who's in the schools? I think about, the Karens of this world, as we call them, and being in a position where it makes it very easy for them to target you with their anger. Why would you put yourself in this position to become a voice for this issue?
I always say, why not? I always say, if I have the voice, which I've been, God blessed, to be able to be, literate and articulate and be able to articulate what I'm trying to say, I say, why not? I've been doing it since I was a teenager. What people think that, discrimination against Muslims started is after September 11th. It didn't. It's been, racism has existed in North America since inception. I mean, we have to only ask the Indigenous people. So even when I was a teenager, if I would, engage in a heated discussion with somebody over the fact that they were rude to my mom, or they said something that didn't quite sit right with me, I always say, if I don't do it, who will? One. Two, the Karens of the world, while they weren't called that when I was a teenager, they may not do it again. So it's because they're used to, ici au Québec, là, like they're used to pointing the fingers at us because they think we won't understand and we won't be able to talk back. And for my parents' generation, the first generation of Quebecers that came here from other parts of the world, they might not have been articulate in English or French enough to be able to say, je suis québécoise, just comme vous. We can, talk back to them. So I always say, why not? What are they going to do to me? If they do hit me, hello, you call the cops.
Right, absolutely. How about you, especially as an artist and a writer, to get pulled into a subject that's so passionate, it becomes very easy to label you with that and start, ignoring you. Why is this important enough to you that you want to take this risk?
Well, I'm gonna echo parts of what Nadia and Nour both said. I personally have never shied away from a struggle. I always felt very privileged myself. I have not, on a personal level, faced what I see so many people passing through. So there is first the sense of responsibility to do that, obligation to do that. Number two, my late mother. She had instilled in me from a very young age, never be quiet when you see injustice in front of you. Not injustice inflicted on you personally, but injustice in front of you. And that has caused me so much trouble throughout my life. But I cherish it. I really continue to cherish it. And I mean, she did that by example herself. So a single woman in Egypt in the 50s and 60s, you know, it was a different world, and she did that. She practiced that. So how can I not? You know, it became it was inherited basically. So and of course, I mean, Bill 21 is not really my first cause that I dirtied my clothes in. I mean, so much stuff I decided I could have just stayed away from, but I really decided that I have to be there. Of course, Bill 21 strikes close to home. It doesn't strike home because it doesn't affect me personally, but so close to home. And but that's really, I think even if I wasn't a Muslim at all, if I didn't have anything to do with the Muslim community, I would have been still very concerned about Bill 21. Because since I came to Quebec, I hear about Quebec values. And really, nobody ever managed to tell me what Quebec values are. Quebec values themselves are very dynamic. I mean, when I came to Quebec 30 plus years ago, gay rights were not a part of Quebec values. Now they are. Native rights were not spoken about. Now they are. So Quebec values are very dynamic. So the only thing that was fixed to me when I came to Canada as Quebec values and Canadian values were the charters. Both the Quebec Charter and the Canadian Charter, I considered them, I read them in the early 90s, in the late 80s, I read them. And I considered that this is the contract between me as a newcomer and the land I am, you know, arriving in and residing in. So the most dangerous part in Law 21 is that it plays foul with the Quebec and Canadian Charter of Rights. With that, so they become meaningless. They become totally meaningless. If a government elected by 35% of the population can strike items of the Quebec Charter of Rights and put the Canadian Charter on hold for 5 years, then who protects us? What protects us? It is fake secularism, because secularism, as I understand it, that the church and the mosque and whatever, any religious institution has no place in governing the state, is totally sacred to me. I totally agree on that, 100%. I had struggles in Egypt before I came here about that and about the role of religion in the state and about items in the Egyptian constitution. Long story on the side, but I never agreed on it that way, because somebody comes and interprets religion the way they want and controls my life based on it. No, thank you very much. So, but when the Quebec Charter is thrown out of the window so easily, so simply, it is not secularism. And also, it is a law that is full of contradictions. I mean, who says that a school teacher has more influence on society than a minister or than a doctor? I mean, who decides these things? So it is totally a populist law that comes for political gains to cater to some parts of society. And we have seen over the past few years what that did to the United States. And unfortunately, we cannot be quiet when we see it done here in Quebec as well.
You put your finger on something for me that I want to come to, and this idea that a decision that is being made by the government without playing within the rules that they themselves have established basically came along one day and ripped the carpet out from a bunch of people. And Nour, I want to talk to you about this a bit because what the audience may not know is that 2 years ago, Teesri Duniya held a series of community discussions while the bill was still being considered as a bill. And you were very generous in sharing your story. And I was blessed to get the opportunity to get to know it, because I wrote the play based on a verbatim text. And one of the things that struck me about your story is that you very much are someone who grew up here, who played within the rules. You learned the language. You did it. You know, you've got this really chic Quebecois look to you. When I think Quebecois, you stand out as exactly what Quebecois looks like to me, you know? And so I wondered what that did to your sense of identity over time as a child, right? You start in school, everything's cool. Suddenly the world is shaken by 9/11. Which, as you know, Nadia said, did not give rise to race racism, but did allow racism to come to the forefront. It became okay to be scared. So, and then we saw this trajectory that continues to the attack in 2017 and on and on and on. So I want to know, what has that done to you in terms of your own sense of identity as a Quebecer? But more importantly, what has that done to the relationships you have with other Quebecois, with the people you grew up with? What's that been like for you?
It's really a difficult question because, first of all, to see your right violated in this way, in this disregard, for no reasons whatsoever. When you were born and raised in Quebec, it's a film I won't be able to describe honestly. Like you said, I went through the Francophone school system. I was one of the child of the 101 law. I had to speak French. I did all my schooling, all my studies in French until my master's degree. So like you said, I played by the rules. And sadly, I see now that even though I did everything I had to do as a daughter of immigrants, you know what? I'm still not considered as a Quebecoise. So I feel like it's a burden for someone my age to grow, in that environment, to grow in a society where you have to defend your rights, your dignity, your identity. And, the debates regarding the accommodement raisonnable started when I was like 14, 13 years old. And I feel since then, it never stopped. I never had like a break from discussing why I wear the hijab, why I can work as a crown prosecutor as a woman who wears the hijab. So I feel that Bill 21 is making the inequalities that are already present in society since 2001 and before more present. And the saddest part about it is the population reacts to such laws, to such statements from the officials, from the government. So when a government disregards human rights in that way, you know what? The population will follow. The population will say, if the government is thinking in that way, we are able to think in that way. And this is something that has been studied before. There are dozens and dozens of research about this topic. When a government take a position about a minority, well, the general public will follow. So this is what's happening right now. And for this reason, we are witnessing like more hate crimes against Muslim women, more insults, more threats against women. And you know what? Being the lawyer on the Bill 21 case, I have lived all of these steps. So I don't think I had the same experience as all of my colleagues that were involved in the Bill 21 trial. I received a lot of insults, a lot of threats, and I wasn't able to even like experience a trial of 7 weeks as a lawyer, as a normal lawyer. A normal lawyer would have been so happy to take part in this discussion, in this debate that is constitutional. But you know what? I was there reading all the hate mail I was receiving because of my participation in this trial. So I think the wound is really too fresh to be able to say what are the consequences on how I'm feeling right now as a Quebecoise. But the thing is, the more I grow up and the less I feel that I belong. And this is something that I'm saying really like it's from my heart, like I don't feel like I belong there. I feel like I'm a stranger, but then again, where do I belong? I was born in Quebec. I never lived somewhere else. So this is really a sad state to be in, especially like you said, I played by the rules and my parents played by the rules. I spoke French all of my life, and I didn't speak English like until 2 years ago. So
right.
I feel this is something that is really violent to live, and I don't think I'll be able to be at peace with what happened to me, with everything in regards to Bill 21.
Nadia, I'm going to bring you in here as well, in terms of, because what I'm hearing from Nour is that part of the problem is that you become reduced down to just one thing, right? They stop seeing you as this whole person and you just become the Muslim. How has that impacted your relationships with others?
I mean, it depends, right? You speak to any minority and they will tell you that they have this gut feeling. You know, you get this gut feeling when someone you meet for the first time, whether it's it's even a professional introduction, a personal introduction, or a stranger on the street, you just get this gut feeling like, oh, great, this person is not seeing me for who I am. This person is reducing me to the cloth on my head. There's actually now a derogatory hand gesture that describes Muslim women, and simply it's just this. It's just this. And so it's extremely worrying where we are reduced down to one thing. We are not the piece of cloth on our head. We are a human being, and yes, the piece of cloth on our head is an integral part of our identity, and we chose to wear it. It's still just a piece of clothing, you know. My family and I recently had an encounter with a Karen in the park who actually called the police on me for swinging on the swings. Now, what she did not know is that I've had a fair bit of medical problems in the past 2 years, and I was physically unable to get on the swings. And this was the first time I had been on the swings because I had been in a wheelchair for 2 years. And so she didn't know anything about me and my background. She just saw a woman on the swings and she decided to come and Karen me. Now, would she have done it were I a white woman? I really don't think so. And my family, you know, I was lucky that my family was there behind me, and I actually had some bystanders become allies. They actually also confronted her. That gut feeling was there from second number one when she approached me and said, excuse me, these are swings for children. You should not be swinging on them. First of all, everybody who lives in an area where there's a park, usually there's swings for kids, swings for adults. And there was no other kid way. There was no line of kids, and I wasn't hogging a swing. Either way, the gut feeling started from second one. But what ended up happening was that further on in our discussion with her, she did make that derogatory statement, and that confirmed for all of us, oh great, she has a problem with Muslims. So it's a problem that, you know, unfortunately exists, and like I said before, we have to confront them in a calm manner. We have to be the water to their fire. They're screaming at us. We have to, you know, talk normally back to them, because or else we'll be reduced down to their level. Now, I want to touch on something that Nour said about Bill 101. Now, when we talk about systemic racism, yes, I will never contest the fact that the French language needs to be protected. Never will I contest that. But if we speak of systemic racism that started existing in this lifetime, that is Bill 101. Nour is a perfect example, and I have to say, Nour, I'm very proud of you. You are all that you have done for our community in just 2 years. Some people have never done in a lifetime, okay? And the fact that you were thrust into it, and the courage and the elegance that you have, you know, portrayed to people, the way you have dealt with it, I'm extremely proud of you. She's a child of Bill 101. I'm not. Why? Because my parents were grandfathered in. I had the privilege of going to school in English. So my experience has been very different from Nour's. Was there racism in my experience? Yes, there was. But my experience is, and even as a teacher in the English system, there is no diversity. So what ends up happening is that is equally worrisome, because we are now, and our school board knows this, we can be a breeding ground for white supremacy. My school board has had trouble with that this past year. And so when we talk about grandfathered in, I'm also grandfathered in with Bill 21. Because I have been a teacher long enough, I won't be affected by this, meaning that they cannot, no one can force me to take off my hijab if I want to continue teaching, which has happened. Some women have had to make that tough choice for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's just economical. They have to feed their children, you know? So for me, I'm grandfathered in, but I'm professionally stuck. I cannot get a promotion. Well, if you talk to any academic, they will tell you that teaching and being in administration is two different things. It's considered a promotion, but it's two different things. I can't be an administrator. I can't take a sabbatical and go and come back. I will be barred from my position. I cannot change my teachable. I can basically have no professional development, but take a colleague of mine, the same age, the same life experiences, except the fact that she is, you know, does not wear hijab, whether she's Muslim or not, she'll be able to do it. That is state-sanctioned racism. That is the stuff.
Yeah, it's a form of ghettoization.
Yep.
Ehab, I want to bring you in here because you said something before, and I think it leads back to this, and that was, this does not impact me personally, but I'm an ally. And one of the things when you are an ally on a subject that you're not impacted by personally is often we get to hear some of the garbage that people are shameful to say in the face of others. And so I wonder what has been your experience as someone who is an ally, who is working on this issue. Do you encounter that ignorance that you've had to put in check?
In reality, no, Deborah, because everybody around me really knows whether in a professional standing or in a social standing, all my everybody I interact with knows I'm so outspoken, I'm so much out there that everybody knows where I stand. And actually, even in issues that have nothing to do, issues of that, you know, borderline on racism or xenophobia, have nothing to do with Muslim or Arab or whatever, people are very cautious around me. And I guess there are a few of us who people are around like that, because they know I will jump, you know, if I hear something that's question. So no, I did not have that experience myself, and I didn't have a lot of even any kind of I mean, on the street, yes, sometimes the weird look because you're brown, because you're whatever, but no serious encounter with racism. But I saw a few things happening in front of me, and I did jump up. One of them was in one of the malls here downtown, where a group of typical Montreal, I'm not going to say Francophone or Anglophone, kids were like really ganging on two girls. I knew the girls were Muslim, by the way, but they didn't, because they were not covered, but just they were different and they were ganging on them. And I mean, I intervened. And in these kinds of situations, you have to really, and yeah, but I didn't hear that, you know, in a friendly discussion. It didn't happen to me.
Good that you're not living that. Nadia, I want to come back to you because there has been more focus recently on systemic racism, including a pushback on the idea that systemic racism even exists. No, we don't. No, that doesn't happen here. No, not at all. So I'd like you to explain to people listening how Bill 21 feeds into systemic racism. And how do you encourage change when people don't even believe that systemic racism exists?
Well, first you have to understand what it means to be able to believe that it exists. Our esteemed...
We've lost your sound a bit, honey.
Can you hear me now?
We're having an echo.
How's that?
Better.
Okay, so first you have to believe, before you even believe that it exists, you have to understand the definition. You have to know what it means. Our esteemed, Premier Ministre François Legault, he says, il n'y a pas un système de racisme au Québec. I'm sorry, that's not the definition. That's not the definition of systemic racism. I mean, it was coined in 1967, and I will quote, It is a form of racism that is embedded as normal practice within a society or an organization. It can lead to such issues as discrimination in criminal justice, employment, housing, healthcare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That exists in Quebec. Whether we talk about, the fact that it has been thrust in our faces by Bill 21, or whether Bill 101, or the Charter of Values, or whatever we talk about, it exists in our society because we have talked to any person of color. They will have been treated a little bit differently. And do they have the proof? No, except they have their gut feeling. I mentioned my medical issues. I spent a fair amount of months in the hospital, and I can give you many examples of people treating me differently and sometimes in derogatory manners, simply because I chose to cover myself while I was in the hospital. My body, my choice. Okay, and is the medical profession targeted by Bill 21? It isn't. But are they, as any person in any medical profession, including a PAB, which is an orderly, are they in a, what do they call it, a position of power, a position of authority? Yes, they are. So it's there. Systemic racism exists. And so I mentioned earlier that, in the English system, there's no diversity, and that's dangerous because it can become a breeding ground for white supremacy. I was privileged enough and that I was allowed by a former principal to put on assemblies in my school to deal with certain things that we had had. We had had some acts of anti-Semitism. We certainly had some acts of Islamophobia. And then there's also the tragic events of the Quebec City mosque shooting. So all that together, I was allowed by my principal with a Jewish colleague who is a dear friend. We put on an assembly and we talked to our kids about it. That led to me doing all my workshops and all my presentations in front of, trying to help as many people as I can, because systemic racism does exist. And I firmly believe, because this is my passion and my profession, the kids are the future. So if you nip what the kids are doing in the bud now, whether they are hearing things at home, whether their friends are telling them things, or whether it's, they've heard things from other teachers, so they feel emboldened. And of course, you feel emboldened in the current climate. It's very important for kids to hear that it's not okay, that it is, that they need to stop. I've linked it to bullying. Kids as young as grade 1 understood that, discriminatory bullying, racist bullying is still bullying. I took the chance of, doing my workshops with grade 1s one time. I used Jane Elliott's blue-eyed, green-eyed experiment. And oh my God, did the kids get it. Some were crying. One of the teachers actually left the room while I was doing the introduction. When she came back in, she was horrified. And the other teachers who were there had to go like, shh, no, this is part of it. And so if someone as young as 6 to 7 years old can understand that this is wrong and systemic racism can be embedded into our society by people of authority, then anybody can understand it.
Nour, I'm going to bring you back into this discussion at this point, because you spoke about something that I have taken pride in most of my life. Well, I can't say most of my life because it came into being while I've been alive. The Canadian Constitution and Section 10. We all cling to that Section 10 as, oh, look at us Canadians, free of discrimination. And here we have a law that has completely undermined all of that. So the question becomes, we're now seeing systemic racism being built into the law. If we didn't see it before, here is a prime example. And as someone who wants to make their life about law, how do you reconcile that? How do you continue the fight you're fighting with the tools that you now know are exactly what they're supposed to be? There's no hiding this. That's the thing. Before, systemic racism was about building a system that took over racism so that the individual didn't have to take responsibility for it. Now it's not hidden anymore. So how do you sit in that and fight through it every day?
I think that Bill 21 goes against everything that has to do with our constitution. Section 33 of the Canadian Charter, you know, the section that has made the government violate human rights, it's something that is really rarely used everywhere in Canada and in any other province. So the reason why I'm fighting against Bill 21, it's not only because I'm a Muslim woman, it's mostly because I'm a lawyer and I know the importance of human rights. The thing about our political elite is that they made the easy choice of, you know, using populism when it comes to the denial of racism. They did the easy choice. It's so easy to violate the rights of a small portion of the population. You know what happened in the last few months when the government was thinking about making the mask something something obligatory to everyone, and they were discussing, is it something that will violate human rights or not? And we are in a like global pandemic. People are dying every day, especially in Montreal at this moment. It was maybe in April, and they were discussing human rights at this moment when they had every reason to, you know, violate human rights. I don't think I know any lawyer that said if you make mask obligatory, it will be a violation of human rights. We all came to an agreement that, you know what, if you make people put mask, it will save lives. And this is something that you can violate rights for. But they didn't ask those questions when it came to violating the rights of minorities. And this is something that is so hurtful, you know, like people were dying and you, like, the government was asking the question, is it something that violates the rights? We want to know before doing this kind of legislation, but before that, they didn't had any of those concerns. I wanted to insist on a point that I was saying before. You know, like I told you, research in psychology has shown that the legislation, the law influences the attitudes of the public towards certain social group. So depending on how a legislation, a statement by the official is understood by the public, it has effects on social norms, social attitudes. And when the government says that there is no systemic racism, when the government said that Bill 21 is not discriminatory, when the government said that there is no Islamophobia in Quebec, it shapes the norms, the social norms of Quebec. It shapes how people view Muslim people, Black people. It shapes how they act toward those people. And there is a lot of consequences to that. And these consequences have been proven by a lot of studies. And you know, the effects of those consequences are not only psychological. Like, it's not only feeling depressed or sad because I'm discriminated against. They have physical impact on people who live discrimination. People who live discrimination have shorter lives. They have more sickness because of that, like diabetes and a lot of other sicknesses. And this is something I wasn't aware of before the trial, but we hired experts and they said it's not only the stress that you have in your head, it's also the stress that your body lives by being discriminated against, by not feeling safe in your country. It has a physical effect. And this is something that shocked me because I was like, okay, it's not only in my head, it's only in my body. And as someone who has been living like all my teenage years and my early adult years in that, I'm seeing slowly those effects on my life. So my point, I guess, is the government, when they refuse to name systemic racism, I'm sorry for my English, it's a little bit so when the government refuse to say those words, it's not only about words, it's about society, it's about how people, the majority, will react to that and how minorities will live it.
Yeah.
So this is something so important, and the government has chosen the easier route.
Easier and also manipulative, right? Because, you know, you said this is a populism law, the government defending their choice to do this, saying the population wants it. But what the government doesn't say is they put many years into feeding the people to want this from them, right? This is not accidental. It didn't come from anywhere, right? It's been slowly feeding little by little, saying it's okay to discriminate. It's okay. It started that night when he looked into the camera and said, la vote ethnique et l'argent, right? It started and it has been rolling since.
And I will tell you something, there are no reason till today that the fact that you wear a hijab or you wear a cross or you wear a kippah is affecting your work. Like, it's all something that was built by the media, by the government, and there is no proof to support what's happening right now. And this is the most dangerous thing.
I want to bring Ehab in here. You said something earlier about before leaving Egypt, you saw this kind of thing starting to take shape in the law in terms of, you know, religion burying itself into the law. And now you're seeing, you know, racism burying itself into the law here in Quebec. Does that ever make you think to yourself, you know, it's time to pick up stakes and get out of here?
Painful question, Deborah. A painful question, because Egypt has gotten much worse than when I left it. And I mean, I have expressed this in one of my poems, that going back is out of question, because so many things have been cut and so many bridges have been burnt already. So no, I mean, I cannot. I accept that anywhere in the world you're going to be living, you're going to face struggles, and only those who bury themselves in I don't know. I don't want to demean video game lovers and Netflix show addicts, but only if you bury yourself in this artificial world could you be convinced that there are no problems around you. So whether it's Egypt or whether it's Canada or whether it's wherever, I mean, yes, sometimes I say, I wish we have a prime minister like Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, for example, or we live in a Scandinavian country where they are much more sincerely progressive. But there is no place in the world that has no problems. You refer to le vote ethnique et l'argent, and I mean, maybe many of our participants, our co-participants here and our attendees are not familiar with that dark day in 1995. But that was an eye-opener for me. I mean, it was an eye-opener that, yes, I always knew that money in politics is a problem. And again, nowhere can we see it more than in the United States. But I always, then I realized that there is a vote and a vote ethnique. You know, there are two different things. Democracy is split in two parts. Well, the vote ethnique, it's a part of the vote, so you don't talk about it as something separate. You accepted those immigrants because they are building this place with you. They are not here to stay on the side and build and not vote. When I hear story reports about the immigrant seasonal workers, for example, it comes to me right away when I think about the Palestinian-Israeli issue and the Palestinians from the West Bank and Gaza working inside Israel, but they'll never be citizens. The workers from all around the world in the Gulf countries that have no say, but build the country for the oil-rich local population. We don't want to be that here. This is unacceptable. This is not where I came to raise my kids in. And I'm back to, there is an overall system that we're coming to live in, and we have to fight for it. Not because we are affected, but because it's going to be a much worse world if not everybody stands shoulder to shoulder and really confront the difficulties that are sprung on us and will be sprung on us every day. And that's what I taught my kids as well, who both of them are like Nour and Nadia, brought up here. They know no other country. They are more, at least before they, I mean, work took them out of Canada now, but before they left Quebec, they were more Quebecer than anything else. It's a reality that we have to live with, and there is no turning back. There is a story, although I think it's a myth, about Tariq ibn Ziyad, who the Muslim commander who conquered Spain, and he burned the ships to say there's no going back. Well, there's no going back.
I agree with you, and I have to say I asked that question facetiously, simply because I think when people ask me that question, it demonstrates their own racism right there, right? Because I am Quebecois. Whether you like it or not, I am Quebecois. But what is constantly being told to us is, you know, with laws like Bill 21, with la vote ethnique, is that we will never be Quebecois in some people's eyes. And so that's part of what we're constantly fighting, right? But I want to continue with you, Ehab, on this question of change and making a difference and allies, because recently we saw the city of Montreal put in place a wonderful woman who is going to be looking at this issue of racism. And I can say in the Black community, I was quite surprised to see quite a lot of angry voices saying, you know, feeling like that position should have been filled by a person of color. I find it interesting that we draw this line that don't see other people of color that aren't Black, but that's a different issue in my head. I think this is, you know, this is part of the divide and conquer game that's played with us, right? Keep us separate, keep us fighting amongst ourselves, and they won't have to fix anything. So when we look at this issue of Bill 21, one of the things that I have found a struggle in terms of bringing people in has been people saying to me, yeah, but I'm not Muslim, that doesn't affect me. And I've always recognized it, you know, as you said earlier, Nadia, if you do it to one, sooner or later, you know, my ass is going to be on the line, right? They came for my neighbor, I said nothing. And so I want to ask you, Ehab, as someone who is a communicator, who is socially engaged, how do you talk to that community, those communities that you need to bring under the umbrella in order to make change?
I'm going to answer with two different examples. Number one, I'm going to answer that inside McGill, where I work, we have a committee that includes all racialized people. And there is always this resistance. The focus now is on Black lives, so let's not talk about something else so that we don't distract the issue. The talk now is about Native rights, so let's not talk about, you know, so unfortunately, this is about the maturity of minorities. I think we minorities have to know that by raising other minorities issues, we're not distracting from you. The society will only be healed if all minorities become equally treated respectfully. And I think that a person who comes from one minority, as long as it is a person, he or she is a person with a broad mind, they will have the strong feeling about all minority sufferings, about all issues. So I for sure am I'm facing these troubles myself, but I'm trying to deal with them. And it's an issue of maturity, you know, because many people come to human rights from the point of defending my group, you know, which is tribal in itself, which is dangerous in itself. Then on a larger scale, to reach out to a wider population, you need to create allies who understand the scope of the struggle. And that's how, for example, we are conducting Muslim Awareness Week, because we can't invite people to listen to us, because if no matter how open we are, there is no links and people will not be interested. But to partner with different groups, to find the people within those groups, within those communities, within those institutions that understand the scope of the difficulty is the way to break this barrier. So then if I go speak to a church congregation or to a theater company congregation, if I may call it, audience, then they have that widespread demography that includes people who might be comfortable with with a Muslim and those who might not. So then you break the barrier and then you can express yourself more clearly and reach out better. It's like, dropping a stone in a pond and the concentric circles just keep getting wider. The important thing is don't drop it in your own pond. You want to go to another pond and drop it, and then it will propagate among the water in that pond. And that's really the best thing I can think of. The other thing is professional work. We are seeking the help, and we should seek the help not only of lawyers and sociologists, but also we need to seek the help of PR firms to work right with everything. Costs money and nothing is easy, and nothing but the idea itself, because we really need to know how to reach out. It is much easier for us, I mean, not for everybody, but for some people, it's easy to confront and answer back. And I guess myself and Nadia are in that category, but we also need the other category that can communicate to people with the way that makes them open to listen.
Yeah, we need both publicists, and I'd love to see us groom more hackers, but that's just me. You know what, guys? It is one of those subjects that we could go on for hours, and we have just flown through our hour. So I'm gonna just come in with one last question for each of you. You look to the future, we all hope for a better future. One of the best ways to predict the future and to build a better future is to look to the past. So if you look to the past for that one lesson you wish people understood that would change the future, what would be that one piece of history that you wish they really understood? Really understood. And I'm going to start with my one piece of history that I always use with everybody. And that is that every time someone says, why don't you people go home? Why don't you go back to where you come from? I always tell them the story of Matthew da Costa, who arrived here with the first ships. We don't hear about him because he was the translator. And what's interesting about Matthew is that he was a person of color. So if you're a translator for the people who are here, for the colonists who came, it tells me very clearly someone was here first. So for me, whenever someone says that, go back to where you came from, I always tell them the story of Matthew. What for you is that one piece of history that if people really understood this, really understood what was at the root of this historical moment, things would change? Nadia?
I would say World War II and the rise of the Nazis. If we really look at it and we draw parallels, excuse me, if we draw parallels with the way the Quebec government is behaving these days, it's scarily enough very, very similar. So if we really understood and if we really empathized with the Jewish people and understood how they ended up being murdered by the millions, it started with little steps. And Quebec is in the not so little steps right now.
Nour, how about for you?
You know what? I won't repeat what Nadia said because it is true that this is the best example you can give. So I will just say that one violation of the rights and freedom of one person weaken the rights of everyone. So we all have a voice, we all have a responsibility to talk against what's happening. And you know what, one day everything that is happening right now will be in school books, and there will be a good side and a bad side, and equality will always be on the good side.
Before I bring you in, Ehab, I just want to flag a comment I saw that flashed up on my screen, and I think it's an important one. And that is that as we speak about this, we have to remember that we do have Francophone allies. And this is really fundamentally important, right? One of the things we look at history, the history that Nadia just spoke of, that horrendous time, one of the people that made the difference are the Germans who recognized it was wrong and, invited people into their homes and, protected them. And so let's not make the same mistake of separating people in English and French, but recognize our friends are not about a language or not a language, it's about the values behind it. Come on in here, Ehab.
Very, very relevant comment, Deborah, and we always have to remind ourselves of that so that we ourselves don't become the same as sometimes looked at us. No, I will continue on the same line that Nadia spoke about, but I'm going to take it back to how Hitler came to power, the process itself. This is the major concern. And unfortunately, people think it's impossible to happen. And we saw Trump trying to make it happen just a few months ago. So don't be so confident of your democracy and democratic system. Democracy and democratic system is a process. It is not a final product. And those of us who came from countries where it doesn't exist know that very well and know how worth protecting it is. So there are so many examples in history that show that the people, and it's a cycle. People thought that we reached nirvana or we reached utopia, and then it turns over. And Muslim history is full of that itself as well. So we have to realize that's a continuous struggle. Never let your guard down, because they, and there is always a they, that are hungry for power and hungry for power at any price, will turn onto you. And as soon as they have the chance, they will take over.
That's right. That's right. And in case anyone's wondering who that they is, just ask yourself who's benefiting from the status quo. Thank you, all of you. Thank you so much for sharing your afternoon with us, for sharing your insight, for sharing your soul. I know it can't be easy sometimes to have to bring that part out to the public, but I think there are many listeners who are listening today who will have a different perspective thanks to what you shared. I want to thank Teesri Duniya for hosting this event and pulling it all together. And Summer, I'm going to bring you back in here. Summer, are you with it? There she is. Yes. The hostess with the mostess. You put a great show together, put a great team together. Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful Saturday afternoon for me. I will turn this back over to you.
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you to all of our wonderful panelists and attendees for this incredibly engaging and relevant discussion. I know that I learned a lot. I know that I'm feeling inspired just sitting here and listening to this and seeing this virtual gathering and shared space that we're holding. So thank you all so much for being here. I just want to highlight and bring back one thing that I think did come up in this discussion, and interestingly enough, came up also in our last discussion panel that was on sexual violence, which is that we were talking about how policy influences culture. And in the last discussion panel, we had addressed that how policy influences culture and how culture also influences policy. And that's why we in the cultural sector must continue to have these discussions and continue to hold these spaces and continue to push back against policy and cultural moves that are oppressive to anyone. So thank you so much to Muslim Awareness Week for creating this space and for collaborating with us and for hosting this wonderful week. And thank you to all of you for your thoughts and all of your hard work in the community. I will stick around for just 5 minutes in case any of, sorry, 1 second, there just is a question here. So I'm gonna stick around for another 5 minutes just in case any of the attendees have any questions or need any sort of contact information or anything like that. If anyone else is available to stick around for another 5 to 10 minutes, of course, you're welcome to do so. I'm gonna just read out, I have a question comment here saying, thank you for the great session and hearing these stories from people affected directly and making noise about it. In terms of creating awareness about ethnic visible minorities, do you think we lie now, unless mishap like Quebec City Mosque incident that shakes us? I'm going to pause the recording and close this panel